Welcome to Countarts. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at simple interest. We're going to explain what it is, show you the formula, and go through some examples which will help you understand simple interest quite well. And so I'm confident that after this lesson, you will be able to do any calculation relating to simple interest based on what we'll be going through. So what is simple interest? Well, simple interest is the interest calculated on the original principal amount for a specific period at a set rate of interest. And so basically what we are calculating here is how much interest there is in a particular scenario, whether you're taking out a loan or whether you're investing into a specific project or you're just putting money away in a fixed deposit or a money market account. We are calculating how much interest you will have earned. And why is it called simple interest? Well, that's because the interest is calculated on the original amount and not on the original amount plus the interests which are to follow. And you'll understand this much better when we go through it in great detail. But basically, it's simple interest because it doesn't take into account compounding. Now, with simple interest, interest is only calculated on the principal, as I've just mentioned. And so you're only calculating it on the original amount for every period. Okay, so whether it's yearly, you'll only be calculating interest on the original amount. That means the interest will be the same every year for the duration of the investment, if it's an investment that you're making. Unlike compound interest, simple interest does not compound over time. And you'll see this as we're about to go into the examples shortly. The interest is the same for all the periods. Now, because interest is calculated on the principal amount, that means the interest is the same for all the periods, as we've already mentioned. And by the way, on compound interest, you'll find the link in the description below for that lesson. Now, without further ado, what is the formula that we use to calculate simple interest? Well, the formula is actually simple. And so if you look at it here, simple interest equals to P times R times T. That's basically it. And so this is a very easy lesson to understand. It's a very easy lesson to go through, and you will be able to grasp it quite quickly because the formula is quite simplified, as you can see here. Simple interest equals to P multiplied by R multiplied by T. Now, what do we mean by P? What do we mean by R? And what do we mean by T? Well, for P, we actually mean the principal amount or the initial value, okay, the initial investment or loan. And so if you're taking out a loan, that will be the loan amount you're taking out. If you're investing in a project, that is the initial investment that you are investing. Okay, and then for R, we're referring to the rate of interest per annum. And so you will be given the percentage relating to the scenario. That would be your R. And then your T would be the time period in years. Now, I must mention here that the T does not specifically have to be years, right? It can be months, it can be quarters, it can be semi-annual, for instance, or it can be every second year. So you just have to be careful with that. But in most cases here, when we're looking at simple interest, we're actually dealing with the number of years. But you will realize that we use the word period as opposed to years because you might be dealing with months. And we're going to look at an example at the end relating to that. And you'll understand this much better as we go through the examples. Important thing to mention here is by rearranging the formula for simple interest, you can calculate any missing variable when the others are provided. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Now, you may be provided with the simple interest, the rate, and the time, but you may not be provided with the principal amount. And so what will we do? We'll just have to rearrange the formula and we'll get what the principal amount is. Or you're given all the other variables, but you're not given the rate. By rearranging this simple formula, you will be able to get your rate. Or you're given all the other variables and you're not given the time period. Again, I'll say you can rearrange this formula and you'll be able to get the time period. And that's why I said after this lesson, you should be able to understand simple interest quite well, because here's the formula for calculating simple interest, but we'll also show you how you rearrange the formulas to get any of the other variables if they are missing. And so that is what we call the flexibility of the simple interest formula, where we can rearrange the formula and get any of the missing variables. Remember, the simple interest itself can be missing, and that's why we use this formula here to get the simple interest, or the principal amount could be missing. So how would we rearrange this formula here to get the principal amount if it's missing? And remember, the P there is the principal amount, the R is the rate of interest per annum, and the T is the time period in years. So what if the principal amount is missing? How would we rearrange the formula to be able to get the principal amount? Well, here is the formula. The principal amount equals to the simple interest divided by the rate of interest per annum multiplied by the time period. And that is how you would get your principal amount. And so you can see all I had to do was to rearrange the formula. In fact, we can do the same to get the rate of interest. How would we get that? Well, we'll take the simple interest divided by the principal amount multiplied by the time period. What about the time period? If it's missing, I'm sure you can already guess what the formula will look like. It's going to be the simple interest divided by the principal amount times the rate of interest. Now, what you notice here is that there is a pattern, right? Whatever variable you're missing, if it's simple interest, of course, you just multiply the three elements and you've got your simple interest. However, if it's any of these other variables, whether principal amount or the rate of interest or the time period, your simple interest will always be the numerator, meaning going on top, and then the other two variables which are available will go at the bottom, meaning the denominator. And that is how you'll be able to get the missing variable. And so these formulas here that you can see here is quite a valuable formula in calculating simple interest or the principal amount or the rate of interest or the time period. And so I hope you will find this quite easy and helpful when you have to do any calculation, whether you're calculating the principal amount, the rate of interest, or the time period. And remember, this is simple interest, meaning that it's not compounded, all right, as we've mentioned initially, but you'll see at the end. Now, what I want us to do is to go through some examples in calculating simple interest and also apply these formulas for calculating either the principal amount, the rate of interest, or the time period, and you'll see how easy it is to apply this formula. So let's have a look at our first example here. We're told that a student borrows 2,000 Rand from a friend at an annual interest rate of 5% for 3 years. Calculate the simple interest, or SI, that's the acronym we'll use here. And secondly, calculate the total repayment amount, meaning how much in total will he be paying back his friend when the 3 years has lapsed. Obviously, you should know that it's going to be the 2,000 Rand that is borrowing plus whatever the interest is. Okay, so let's bring up our formula for simple interest. There we go. It's the principal amount multiplied by the rate of interest multiplied by the time period. And so what is our answer going to be? Well, the first question is, what is our principal? Well, our principal amount is how much he's actually borrowing. Okay, and so that's the 2,000 Rand here. And so that's going to be our principal. And then we multiply that by the rate. What is our rate of interest? Well, that's usually the percentage that we're given. And we're told that the annual interest rate of 5%. And so it's going to put here 5%, or if you want to put it in decimals, 0.05. And then we multiply that by the time period. What is our time period? 3 years. Okay, and so these are our elements here: 2,000 Rand for the principal, 5% per annum for the rate, and the time period is 3 years. Very easy to do. Now, when we plug that into our formula, simple interest equals to 2,000 Rand multiplied by 5% multiplied by 3, that will give us 300 Rand. That is the simple interest, or that is how much interest this student will incur for the next 3 years. And so we've already calculated number 1 of the required. What about number 2, the total repayment amount? How much will he have to hand over to his friend after 3 years? Well, that's going to be the 2,000 Rand plus the 300 Rand. Okay, that's the total repayment amount. And so he's going to pay back his friend 2,300 Rand. I hope you see how easy it is to apply the simple interest formula to calculate what the simple interest amount, or what the interest amount is for the duration of the loan or the borrowing in this case. Let's have a look at the second example here. We're told that Sarah earned 450 Rand in simple interest after 5 years at an annual interest rate of 6%. What was the principal amount? And so we are told that Sarah earned 450 Rand in simple interest. That means we're given the simple interest. And so we're not going to be using the formula for simple interest to calculate this one here. But we'll use that formula by rearranging it. We calculate for what is missing. But what is missing here? Well, we have the simple interest, 450 Rand. And that's how much she will earn after 5 years. And so what is this 5 years? That is our time period. So we're given the time here. And then we're told that it's at an annual interest rate of 6%. And so we're given the rate as well here. And so they asked us what is the principal amount. And so we have all the other elements except the principal amount. And what I'd like you to do here is to pause the video, attempt the rest of the questions as we open them. And so you can calculate this one here and see if you'll get the same answer as mine. And then you can press continue and see if you're understanding it, because these are quite easy examples to follow. Okay, I hope you paused the video, you've attempted this question here, and I hope you'll do the same for the subsequent questions that we'll be looking at shortly. And so let's bring up our formula for the principal amount. How do we calculate that? Well, we know for a fact that the simple interest is going to be our numerator, and then our rate of interest and our time period would be the denominator, as we saw earlier. And so this is our formula. The principal amount will be the simple interest divided by the rate times the time period. Okay, so what is our answer going to be here? Well, the simple interest is the 450, as we've mentioned, and we divide that by the rate of interest of 6% multiplied by the time period of 5 years. And so these are our elements as we have put them here, or our variables that are given. And so our answer is going to be 1,500 Rand. I hope that was easy enough. I hope you paused the video, you attempted it, and you got the exact same answer as mine. This is how you apply the formula that has been rearranged to calculate whatever variable is missing, if it's not simple interest, of course. If it's simple interest, we looked at it in our first example. Here's another question, example 3, and I hope you'll pause, attempt it, and then press play and mark yourself and see if you're getting it correctly. And hopefully you are, as you can see how easy it is to do this. John invested 8,000 Rand in a savings account for 4 years and earned 1,280 Rand in simple interest. What was the annual rate of interest? And so we're already told here that our missing variable is the annual rate of interest. That means we're calculating, or we want a percentage here. And so what do we have? Well, if John invested 8,000 Rand, what do we call that? That is our principal amount. In a savings account for 4 years, what do we call this for? That is our time period. And earned 1,280 Rand in simple interest. And so we are given the simple interest as well. And so how do we calculate our annual rate of interest? Well, here's our formula. The rate of interest would be the simple interest divided by the principal amount multiplied by the time period. And so let's bring up our elements here as we've mentioned them. The simple interest is the 1,280 Rand. The principal amount is the 8,000 Rand, and the time period is 4 years. And so once we plug it into our formula, what is our answer? Our answer is 4%. Okay, that is how we go about getting the rate of interest if that is the missing variable and we're given the other elements. I hope that was easy enough. I hope you got that correctly as well. Here's another example. A company took a 12,000 Rand loan at an annual interest rate of 7% and paid 2,520 Rand in simple interest. How long was the loan period? Well, here's another easy example. We know what we have to calculate, the time period, because we're asked how long was the loan period. And so what do we have here? Well, a company took a 12,000 Rand loan. What do we call that? That is the principal amount at an annual interest rate of 7%. What do we call the 7%? That is our rate of interest, and paid 2,520 Rand in simple interest, as they have mentioned. That is simple interest. And so what is the formula for calculating the time period? Well, as usual, it's quite easy. Time period is equal to the simple interest divided by the principal amount multiplied by the rate of interest that we are given. And so what are our elements here? As we have mentioned them, simple interest 2,520 Rand, principal amount 12,000 Rand, and the rate of interest 7%. And so when we plug it into our formula, it's going to be 2,520 Rand divided by the 12,000 Rand multiplied by the 7%. Remember, you can either put it as a percentage by pressing 7 and then the percentage sign, or putting the percentage as a decimal, and so that would be 0.07. And so whichever way you choose to do it, you just have to know that it's a percentage when you're looking at the rate. And so this is how our formula is going to look like, and we get an answer of 3 years. And so the loan period was 3 years if the company took out a 12,000 Rand loan and paid 2,520 Rand in interest at the rate of 7%. Let's have a look at one more example. And this example will specifically show you a scenario where the time period does not coincide with the interest rate. And here it is. James borrows 5,000 Rand at an annual interest rate of 6%. Now, very important, annual interest rate. Okay, they said annual here, just like they have been saying with the other questions. And so that's fine, there's no issue there. For 8 months, how much simple interest will he owe? And so we are back to calculating the simple interest, but we have a bit of a problem in this question where the interest rate is annual. However, the time period is in months and not annually. It's not in number of years. And so that's why we have a bit of an issue here. And so take note of this, which is very important when you are calculating a simple interest in this scenario. The time period must always align with the interest rate period. E.g., if your time period is annual, your interest rate has to be annual. Or if your time period is monthly, your interest rate has to be monthly. You need to make sure that they align for accurate calculations. Otherwise, you'll get your calculations incorrectly. And so we cannot put our time as 8. And so when you're plugging it into your calculator, we know that we're calculating interest rate, and we know the interest rate is your P multiplied by your R multiplied by your T. But we can't put the T as 8 because it's 8 months. It's not 8 years. So it's in months instead of years. And you know that our interest rate is per year because we were told here annual. And so that's where the problem is. And so what do we need to do? We need to either convert our interest rate into months so that we can get how much the interest rate is for the 8 months, or we need to convert our months into years. Now, it's easy to convert our months into years. What are we going to do? Well, let's bring up our formula here. Simple interest equals to the principal multiplied by the rate multiplied by the time. Okay, but we know that the time does not coincide with the interest rate. And so here is how we will fix that. Okay, we need to change the months into years. And so how many years is 8 months? Well, 8 months is 8 divided by 12. Okay, so 8 divided by 12 will give us a decimal, or it will give us a fraction. And so here's how it's going to look. The time period is 8 divided by 12, or 2 over 3. Okay, so we know that 8 months is how many years? It's 2/3 of a year. Okay, otherwise if you want to convert it to decimals, it's 0.67 years, if of course you round it to 2 decimal places. Okay, but we'll leave it here as a fraction. It's going to be 2 over 3. So how many years are we dealing with here? It's 2/3 of a year. Okay, now that I've converted my time into years, which is 2/3 of a year, I can now use my simple interest formula to calculate my simple interest. So my P will of course remain at how many? 5,000 Rand. Okay, because that's how much James is borrowing, 5,000 Rand. That is my principal amount. And then what is my rate? My rate is 6%, or 0.06. Okay, and then we'll multiply that by our time. What is our time? Our time is either 0.67 years or 2 over 3. And so here are our variables. Okay, the principal, as I mentioned, 5,000 Rand, the rate 6%, and the time is 2 over 3 years. Okay, you can see, and so you can see here the challenge was that our time was showing in months, yet we know that our interest rate was given as an annual interest rate, and so we needed to convert our months into years. And so we simply take the number of months divided by 12, because that's how many months we have in a year, and of course you simplify it to 2 over 3. Now that we have our elements, our time, we've already put it in years, we're going to get our answer for simple interest. It's going to be 5,000 Rand times 6% times 2 over 3, and that gives us a simple interest of 200 Rand. Alright, that is how much he owes in simple interest after 8 months if he's incurring an interest rate of 6% for borrowing 5,000 Rand. I hope that's clear enough. This last example here just threw a bit of a complication because, like I said, the time period and the interest rate did not align, and so we needed to make sure that they aligned, and we did that by changing the months into years, because the interest rate is annual. If you'd like to understand more on this one here, we've got a lesson specifically that is based on the effective interest rate and nominal interest rate and the conversion between months and years, or from one period to another. And so you'll find that link to that lesson in the description below. But I hope these examples have been clear enough, easy enough. The only one which was a bit tricky was this last one here, as I've mentioned. Now what I'd like to do is just give you a few notes on the difference between the compound interest and simple interest, okay, or simple interest versus compound interest, and you'll be able to appreciate what the differences are and why you shouldn't make a mistake by confusing one and the other, or don't think that you could use the words simple interest and compound interest interchangeably. No, they're different. Okay, and here it is. Simple interest is lower than compound interest. Why is that? Well, that's because simple interest calculates the interest every year based on the original or the principal amount, okay, while compound interest calculates interest based on the original amount plus whatever interest it would have earned in the previous period. So that's an important thing to mention. Like I said, if you want to check out the lesson on the compound interest, find the link in the description below and you'll see examples specifically on that. But as we have said that simple interest is lower than compound interest, this is except for the first period where the interest is the same for both methods, whether you're using the simple interest method or the compound interest method. In the first year, since you're earning interest for the first time, the interest under the simple interest method and under the compound interest method will be exactly the same. Okay, so in both simple and compound interest, the interest for the first year is calculated on the principal because no interest has been earned yet. That's specifically for compound interest. Okay, so it won't take into account any additional interest in the first year because it does not yet earned any interest. That is why the interest will be the same for both methods. Okay, so here's an example. For 1,000 Rand at 10% interest, the first year interest is 100 Rand for both. Okay, that would be 1,000 Rand times 10%, which will give you 100 Rand interest. And that would be the same for both simple interest and compound interest. The differences, however, starts from the second period, okay, because in the first period interest has already been earned. That is where now the interest under compound interest method will be higher than the interest under simple interest, okay. And so the simple interest continues to calculate interest only on the original principal every year. However, the compound interest recalculates the interest on the principal plus the accumulated interest after the first year. And so here's an example. For simple interest, 1,000 Rand at 10% interest. Interest for the second period would be 100 Rand still, okay? Because it's simple interest. You're still taking the 1,000 Rand multiplied by the 10%. We're not taking into account the 100 Rand which was earned in the first year, okay? So this is an example for the second period, okay? Let's look at an example under the compound interest. You see here what happens. For compound interest, 1,000 Rand at 10% interest. Interest for the second period is 110 Rand. How do you get that? When we take the 1,000 Rand principal amount plus the 100 Rand interest earned in the first period, and we use that answer to multiply by 10% to get the new interest, okay, which is 110 Rand. And so you can see interest under the compound interest method is higher than under the simple interest method. And interest under the compound interest method will always be higher with each new period because you keep earning interest, you keep adding that to your principal, and that is what you use as the basis for calculating the interest for the new period. And that means it's going to always be increasing under the compound interest method. But under the simple interest method, like we said, it doesn't take into account the prior period interest. I hope this made sense. I hope you now have a clue of what the simple interest is and you're able to apply the formula to either calculate the simple interest or any of the other missing variables. If you've gained value indeed from this lesson, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments below that you have gained value. And share this lesson to those you think it might help. Till next time, cheers.